And we'll wrap things up uh, with another team that's hot. Three in a row for West Branch. Um, Tough one last week, 28-21 against Durant. Um, what do you think about this Bear team? I saw them, what was that, week two down and they played a pretty good West Liberty team, pretty tough. Came up
Yeah.
short in that one, but like you talked about with some of these other schools, a lot of these schools in this area, Ryan, that have been really battle tested so far. I think you can say the same about West Branch.
Yeah. I think I saw the light bulb come on for them. I really do. I had them in week 3. And that was the rain week, if you will.
I wimped out on that one. I was supposed to shoot photos and I wimped out.
I don't blame you. That week was tough. I mean, we had games all over. Solon was at Union. I can't remember what else we had. Clear Creek was at Xavier. And I mean, it was inescapable. The whole state was covered in like a green, like the radar was just, I just quit looking at it because you were just going to get wet. But they played at Solon. They played Cascade at Solon in what ended up being kind of a weird game. They were down 21-0, came back and had a chance, at the ball, like the 35-yard line to go in and tie it. And you look at the stats after that game, and it basically looked like they should have won. As I totaled up the stats, it was a weird game. Cascade had a pick 6, but they were without Gavin Hirschman, their quarterback for West Liberty.
I should mention, he missed that West Liberty game.
And that was his first game back. And he threw it like 50 times, which Gavin, he's a great quarterback. He can really throw it, but that's not – West Branch isn't throwing it 50 times. That's not their MO.
No.
And I think they were kind of like what we talked about with Solon. I think they were still kind of trying to figure out exactly what they were going to be. They replaced a lot. I mean, from last year, they replaced a really good big senior class and some key guys, tailback, receiver, a couple guys on the line. I felt like they were kind of feeling it out that game. The next week, they were at Wilton, and I went over there, and that just felt like a light bulb game for me. I thought it would be a really good game, which is why I went over there. And I have some family over in that area, so I kind of made a trip of it and saw some family and stuff, which was really fun. But I thought that would be a really good game. And frankly, it wasn't. They came out and, they dominated that game. And it's one of those ones where I'm driving home that night and I'm kind of like, who does this say more about? Well, Wilton's played well after that. They played Beckman, who's undefeated in district play, and that's who West Branch has this week. But they played them tough last week. I think that was just kind of the light bulb game for West Branch, where it all kind of came together. I think Gavin Hirschman's gotten a little bit more healthy as the seasons went on. He was really good in that game. And then they went up to Maquoketa Valley the week after that in a COVID schedule switch game. But I like, again, very similar to what we talked about with Solon, I think they've figured out kind of what they are. They're really good on defense. West Branch teams are always really good on defense, but they're playing really well. Jeff Bowie, I know you've watched Jeff. We talked about some other guys. He's a difference maker. You have to scheme around him. He just is – he's so disruptive on that defensive line. And when you can be disruptive on the defensive line in high school football, you're going to give yourself a chance in every game. Durant has a really good sophomore running back, Nolan DeLong, and I think he was leading 1A. He was right around 900 yards rushing, and I think West Branch held him to 20.
Wow.
And so, they just really controlled that. I wasn't there. I didn't watch it, but statistically really controlled that game up front. And I think they've figured out what they are a little bit as far as being a team that can kind of control the clock a little bit, get some big plays on offense maybe. But they have a really good quarterback in Hirschman. They have a sophomore running back, Andy Henson, that they really like. He's gotten much better, I think, as the season has gone on. Again, you're talking about guys coming in that they really like, and it's their first season of varsity football, And I think he's really improved. And I think defensively is where they've made their biggest improvement. I know that their coaches weren't happy with how they played defensively that night at West Liberty. And West Liberty's got a really talented running back. You were there that night.
Yeah, that kid's good.
Yes, he's very good. And I think he had like 270, 280 on him, which that's what West Branch usually gives up in like 2 or 3 games to a team. you
That
know,
was the most surprising thing for me is you hardly ever see West Branch give up big plays on defense.
yes,
They may bend a
yes,
little bit, but those were big
right,
plays. That's what surprised me
right.
the most.
And their coaches talked a lot about being more physical. And I know they thought they made big strides in that after I talked to them about that Cascade game that felt a little fluky. Cascade's a really good team. But you saw it in that Wilton game. They were just much more physical. They'll have a test this week. This Beckman game will be interesting. It's on the road. You know, it's their third straight road game. But they're another team. It's just, I smile when I say this because it's so West Branch, right? You know, at the end of the year, they're going to be playing well and they're going to be in position to win playoff games. It's just the way that it seems to always be. A couple of those years, I remember 3 or 4 years ago, they played like everybody on the team at quarterback. They just had injury after injury after injury. And Cooper Cobbla, who was like their all-state tight end, ends up playing quarterback at the end. But still, and I think they ran into Regina that year. But still, at the end of the year, they rattle off 2-3 wins, and you're like, man, they look really good now. And I think they figured it out in that Wilton game. Again, the playoffs are going to be different this year. It's going to be interesting. But they're a team that lost 2 in a row early, that has a chance to go in, winning 4 in a row, feeling really good about themselves. And if they get a win this weekend, they probably put themselves in a good position seeding-wise as far as who they get in those first couple rounds. I think they're similar to Clear Creek in that and Solon, playing your best at this time of year is going to give you a chance to win playoff games. And that's where they're going to be. And then they're a little bit different where they kind of hang their hat defensively. And they've really made big strides defensively. Even between the Cascade game, which I thought they were good, in that Wilton game, I mean, they were dominant defensively. And that Wilton team has put up points against basically everybody else they played. So I think they're in a really good spot for them going into the playoffs. Defense will win you games, and they have some difference makers on that defense.
Man, Ryan, it sounds like we could have a really, really interesting next month here with the playoffs, because it sounds like these, we just went through all 7 teams, and it sounds like they all have a chance to make some noise here in the playoffs.
And I was just doing that as I sent you kind of, these are the things that we can talk about, sent you some talking points. I looked down, and I'm like, West is 3-0. West Branch has won 3 in a row. Solon's won 4 in a row. Regina's won 5 in a row.
Right.
Clear Creek's won 3 in a row. And then you look at some of the losses that those teams have. Those teams don't have, Regina, obviously, we just said, lost to a 4A team. You look at where you expect them to be. Clear Creek's got a 1-point loss and a loss to the number 1 ranked team. Solon's got a loss to 2 top 5 teams. You look at it and you're kind of like, wow. I mean, if it does set up the way that I think it will, where you have some buys early, some of the higher seeded teams have buys early. We could be looking at a lot of teams that have buys, Rob. And then when you have those 4-person pods or whatever, we could be looking at a lot of teams in our area, most of the teams in our area, advancing out of that to that second one, and having their seasons alive into, November. I don't have the calendar right in front of me, but playing football for a long time. So we're just getting started. It's like the Big Ten. We're just getting started with playing football. Like, as long as it's not like last year when we had snow. I know a lot of places that were playing late last year, someone was shoveling snow off their field multiple times in October. So, because I don't think I'm going to be able to get you on the sidelines if there's snow down there.
As much as I don't like being in the snow and being cold, man, snow is cool for photos. Snow photos are great.
Yeah, you were at Liberty Solon playoff game last year, I believe.
Yes.
And there was like some, I don't know if it's snow or the
miserable
misting rain, but those shots and the lights, you get the precipitation with the stadium lights behind it. It's like those are awesome.
I think I did the first half of that game, and then I think I drove over to West Branch.
Yeah, you did.
That night too, and it was crazy.
Yeah.
It was not nice.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the thing is people have been saying, oh, like we've been missing you or whatever. Well, I've been sitting outside at a lot of these, at like a Kingston or like up at Dalzell Field in Dubuque. It's like I just grab a corner of the bleachers at these big stadiums and spread my stuff out. Well, I mean, I'm not doing that when it's 5 degrees out. So, I mean, everybody gives me a hard time, or the writers a hard time. It's like people are like, oh, did you put your long johns on tonight? I'm like, no, I'm sitting in the press box. Like, where's my space heater? Like,
Yeah, there's
I don't
nothing
need to
worse than
bundle up.
trying to type with cold fingers, man, or shoot photos with cold fingers, and I'm like unable to hit the shutter because my fingers frozen. So
Man, when I started doing this in Nebraska, we the paper I worked at was in a fairly rural area. We had a lot of 8-man teams in Nebraska. I actually covered this game was actually at Drew Otts High School that went on to play at Iowa. But at Giltner, they played a playoff game where it was a really good game, like two top 3 or 4 teams, but it rained the whole time, and they were talking about it being like blizzard-like conditions because they were like, we could get like a foot of snow and the wind's going to blow really hard. It just depends on when it switches over from rain to snow. And so these 8-man teams, like none of them had press box. I mean, they had press boxes, but they're like, you could fit like 3 people up there.
Like
and they
the old
were
West Branch, the old West Branch.
I mean, smaller. I mean, it's like a really skinny pole building, and it's like, it's the clock operator, and it really is like the game personnel. So we would just walk the sidelines. I mean, that's how I learned to do that. And at the 8-man schools, there's only a handful of kids on the sideline. They have 25 kids on the roster, so you can dodge and get around. And so I've got my clipboard covered with like a garbage sack, trying to like keep it dry. It rained like 32.1 degree rain for the entire game. And our photographer had photos of this. There were icicles on the goalpost that were like a foot long because it was just freezing. My car was I just got in my car and just started the heater and just sat there for like an hour and a half and typed my story until it took that entire time to melt. Like my car was just formed into like an igloo of ice. But that was the most miserable. I just prayed the whole time that it would start snowing because snow is a lot easier than 32-degree rain,
Without question. Well, now you've convinced me. I hope it doesn't snow or rain or any of those things for the playoffs. But whatever weather we have, it sounds like we're going to have some really good football and something to look forward to. And I hope people come back and continue to listen to this. We're going to try to do we will, maybe on Wednesday of this week, which would be October the 7th, preview this week's games. And maybe we'll do these on Mondays where we kind of look back a little bit and then preview the games on Wednesdays. Yeah. And we're going to be adding as much new type of bell and whistle content as much as we can here at Your Prep Sports. So hopefully the users and people who visit the site enjoy the additions.
Yeah, we'll try to make this one maybe more where we can talk to some individual players or matchups or something as we go forward a little bit, or look at some questions kind of things. And this time it's like we kind of wanted it to be broad, I think, Rob, as it was kind of our first time. But we'll try to preview some of those games. That'll give me a chance to give people a bunch of useless stat information that nobody wants to hear. Since
people love numbers.
I'm big into the stat stuff, but I'm looking forward to that one as we go forward, just because what I think is really cool about the playoffs is you get these matchups that you don't traditionally have. Now, it'll be interesting to see how they do that. I think they're going to try to use geography, in this COVID season as much as they can, but we could have some rematches. We could have some really interesting matchups. So I think it'll be fun to kind of preview those and let people know maybe what to expect from these teams a little bit that you don't play year in and year out. So we can maybe take a look at how we think some of those teams match up too. But it'll be fun. I'm looking forward to it, Rob.
I am as well, and I like to thank everybody for listening to the inaugural maiden voyage here of the Seven Nation podcast, and look forward to these every Monday moving forward. And we'll go through basketball season. We're going to hit on other sports, so don't think like we're going to overlook your sport. We're going to try to mingle in some more sports here. Football's the front porch right now because we're heading into the playoffs, but we're going to hit on all sports moving forward. So thanks for joining us. Great stuff, Ryan. And we'll be back later this week with the football preview podcast, and we'll continue to do this going forward. So thanks again for joining us, and we'll talk to you soon.